Federal regulators once forced a manufacturer to recall 250,000 motorcycles because the brakes could quietly stop working. That's not a rumor. That's a filed document. Some machines earn their reputation through raw power. Others earn it through engineering that failed riders in the real world. One bike on this list is still in showrooms right now. Number 6. Kawasaki H2 750 Mach IV. Picture a rider walking into a Kawasaki dealership in 1972 with about $1,400. He rides away on what was, at the time, the fastest accelerating production motorcycle you could legally buy. 2 weeks later, the motorcycle is in a ditch. His arm is in a cast. That story happened often enough that riders eventually stopped calling it the Mach IV and started calling it the widowmaker. Power came from a 748cc two-stroke triple producing around 74 horsepower. By today's standards, that number doesn't sound especially impressive, but horsepower was never the real story. It was how the power arrived. Below roughly 6,000 RPM, the engine feels surprisingly calm, almost lazy, like an ordinary commuter motorcycle. Then, the power band arrives all at once. On a cold road, halfway through a corner, or across a patch of damp pavement, the rear tire could suddenly be asked to handle far more power than it was ready for. There was no traction control, no riding modes, no electronic safety nets. Those technologies were still decades away. Here's what many people misunderstand about this motorcycle. It wasn't just the engine that made it dangerous. It was the chassis. Kawasaki placed an incredibly aggressive engine into a frame that simply wasn't stiff enough. The steering head flexed under heavy loads. The swing arm could twist during hard acceleration. Open the throttle aggressively in third gear, the front wheel became light. The handlebars began to shake. And suddenly, you were reacting to the motorcycle instead of controlling it. The brakes deserved their own warning. A single front disc handled stopping duties. After only a couple of hard braking events, fade became a serious problem. Spend any time talking with longtime owners, and you'll hear the same advice repeated again and again. Brake early, never late. There was another drawback as well. Fuel range. Ride the H2 the way it encouraged you to ride, and you'd likely be searching for a petrol station before reaching 80 miles. Today, a clean, unrestored example can sell at auction for anywhere between $15,000 and $30,000. That's remarkable money for a motorcycle with so many obvious shortcomings. A period Honda CB 750 costs considerably less, and by almost every measurable standard, it's the better motorcycle. Here's my opinion. I'd absolutely own one, but I would never push it anywhere near its limits. Today, the Kawasaki H2 750 Mach IV is less of a motorcycle and more of a museum piece that just happens to be street legal, because wild two-stroke power is one kind of danger. Poor engineering on a modern motorcycle is something else entirely. And the next motorcycle on this list left the factory with a flaw serious enough that it had to be corrected during production. Number 5. Suzuki TL1000S. 996 cubic centimeters, a V-twin engine, around 125 horsepower. On paper, back in 1997, that meant Ducati-level performance. At a Japanese price, the Suzuki TL1000S sold for roughly $9,000. A Ducati 916 cost nearly twice as much. It sounded like an incredible bargain. The problem was hiding at the back of the motorcycle. Instead of using a conventional rear shock, Suzuki fitted a rotary damper. It was a compact suspension design inspired by racing technology. For the first 20 minutes, it worked beautifully. Then the damping fluid heated up. The damping faded, and the rear suspension began behaving like a pogo stick with a bad attitude. Here's what that meant in the real world. Imagine you're 40 minutes into a ride through your favorite canyon road. The tires are warm, your confidence is high. Then you hit a series of ripples while leaned over in a fast corner. The rear suspension starts bouncing, loading, then unloading. That movement unsettles the front end. The handlebars snap left, then right. Suddenly, you're fighting a full-blown tank slapper on a motorcycle with a short wheelbase and a very powerful V-twin. Suzuki knew there was a problem. During the very first production year, the company added a steering damper as a running update. Later revisions improved the suspension even further. But by then, the reputation had already spread. The British motorcycle press was especially harsh. The TL1000S remained in production until 2001, then quietly disappeared. There was another weakness too, heat. The rear cylinder radiates a tremendous amount of warmth onto your right leg while sitting in traffic. Ask almost any long-term owner, and they'll tell you exactly the same thing. Now here's my opinion, and I know it isn't the popular one. A properly sorted TL1000S, fitted with a quality aftermarket rear shock conversion and fresh tires. Maybe one of the best value V-twins you can buy in America today, for somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000. You get a motorcycle packed with personality, but an untouched example, bought cheaply from someone who insists, "It never gave me any problems," isn't a bargain. It's a gamble, especially if you've never owned a large capacity V-twin before. Compare it with Honda's Superhawk from the same era. The Honda produced less power, it delivered far less drama, and it never required the factory to step in and address a major design flaw. That's exactly why riders remember the Honda with affection, and the Suzuki with caution. If you're enjoying this breakdown so far, don't forget to hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel reach more riders. Number 4. Yamaha V-Max. When people talk about dangerous Japanese motorcycles, most immediately think of sport bikes. They're looking in the wrong direction. One of the wildest Japanese motorcycles of the 1980s looked like a cruiser, complete with chrome intake scoops on both sides of the fuel tank. Power came from an 1198cc V4 engine. Yamaha claimed around 145 horsepower back in 1985. To put that into perspective, a Harley Davidson Softail from the same year produced fewer than 50 horsepower. Think about that for a moment. Yamaha essentially built a drag bike, added a passenger seat, and sold it to anyone with a motorcycle license. The feature that made it truly unforgettable was something called V-Boost. Above roughly 6,000 RPM, butterfly valves opened between the intake tracks. The engine suddenly breathed far more air, and the power delivery changed instantly. It wasn't a smooth increase. It was more like flipping a switch. Many riders gently rolled on the throttle in second gear, only to discover the front wheel pointing toward the sky before they had any idea what was happening. But the real weakness wasn't the engine, it was the chassis. The original V-Max used a relatively ordinary frame, a narrow swing arm, soft front forks, and geometry that clearly favored straight-line acceleration over cornering performance. Talk to owners of first-generation V-Max motorcycles, and many will tell you the same story. The chassis could actually flex during fast corners. That explains why aftermarket fork braces and chassis reinforcement kits became so popular throughout the 1980s and 1990s. The motorcycle desperately needed them. The brakes told a similar story. They were perfectly acceptable for a traditional cruiser, but far too modest for a motorcycle capable of reaching around 140 miles an hour. Then there was everyday practicality, fuel range. Ride the V-Max the way Yamaha clearly expected you to, and you'd often see the fuel warning light after roughly 100 miles. Here's my opinion, I'd absolutely own one. But before riding it with any enthusiasm, I'd install a quality fork brace, fit modern tires, and make sure the chassis was ready for the performance hiding beneath it. Today, clean first-generation examples generally sell for somewhere between $4,000 and $7,000. That's an incredible amount of motorcycle for the money. Compare it with a Honda Magna the 5th 45 from the same era. The Honda offers much of the same attitude, with considerably more predictable handling, and for roughly the same price. The Yamaha is unquestionably more exciting. It's also far more likely to bite the rider who underestimates it. Every motorcycle we've covered so far was dangerous because of the way it was engineered. The next one became dangerous for a completely different reason. Not because of how it left the factory, but because of what happened after it reached customers. And it involves the biggest motorcycle brand in America. And number 3, Harley Davidson Touring. Imagine rolling toward a red light on a fully loaded touring motorcycle weighing nearly 900 pounds. You squeeze the brake lever, and almost nothing happens. That was the concern behind a major Harley Davidson recall announced in February of 2018. The company recalled roughly 250,000 motorcycles worldwide. Nearly 175,000 of those were in the United States. The recall covered 31 different models built between 2008 and 2011. The problem was clearly documented. If the DOT4 brake fluid wasn't replaced at the recommended 2-year service interval, deposits could form inside the ABS control unit. Those deposits could cause an internal valve to stick. The result: a sudden loss of braking at one wheel without warning. The investigation actually began much earlier. In July of 2016, regulators started looking into the issue after receiving 43 customer complaints. Those reports included 3 crashes. During the investigation, documents showed that Harley Davidson proposed handling the problem through a service campaign instead of issuing a formal recall. Regulators rejected that approach. And that wasn't the only braking issue. Later in 2016, Harley Davidson recalled approximately 308,000 motorcycles worldwide because the rear brake light switch was positioned too close to the exhaust system. Excessive heat could damage the switch, cause brake fluid leaks, and reduce rear braking performance. That recall affected Touring, CVO Touring, and trike models built between 2009 and 2012. So why does this motorcycle appear on a list of dangerous machines? Because thousands of these motorcycles are still being bought and sold every year. Many change hands privately for somewhere between $8,000 and $14,000. And a surprising number of buyers never verify whether the recall work was actually completed. Here's my opinion. These are outstanding touring motorcycles. I'd happily own one. But buying a used Harley Davidson touring model from this production period without checking the vehicle identification number through the official federal recall database is simply taking an unnecessary risk. It takes about 90 seconds. And it costs nothing. There's one more consideration as well: weight. These motorcycles tip the scales at roughly 800 pounds before adding luggage or a passenger. When a motorcycle weighs that much, any braking problem becomes far more serious than it would be on a lighter machine. Compare it with an Indian Chieftain from around 2014. The Indian carries similar weight, but it doesn't carry this particular recall history. If you're enjoying honest motorcycle breakdowns like this, don't forget to subscribe, because the next motorcycle on this list became so controversial, it helped change the entire motorcycle industry. Number 2. Suzuki Hayabusa, $10,500. That's roughly what a brand new Suzuki Hayabusa cost back in 1999. For that money, you could buy a production motorcycle capable of reaching around 194 miles per hour straight from the showroom. Think about that for a moment. For less than $11,000, with no special paperwork, no race license, and no track-only restrictions, any rider with a valid motorcycle license in America could walk into a dealership on a Saturday morning, sign the paperwork, and ride home on one of the fastest motorcycles the world had ever seen. The industry's reaction was immediate. Within about a year, the major motorcycle manufacturers reached an informal agreement to electronically limit production motorcycles to 186 miles per hour. That speed limit still influences the motorcycles you can buy today, and the Hayabusa is the reason it exists. The current model is powered by a 1,340cc inline-4 producing around 188 horsepower. Those numbers are impressive, but they don't fully explain what the motorcycle feels like. Cruising at 60 miles an hour in third gear, a gentle twist of the throttle is enough to send you into license-losing speeds before you've even realized how quickly it's happening. That's not because the motorcycle feels aggressive. It's because it delivers its performance with astonishing ease. Here's the part many lists overlook. The Hayabusa is actually an incredibly stable motorcycle. Its long wheelbase, exceptional aerodynamics, and the full suite of lean-sensitive electronic rider aids found on the current 2026 model, starting at around $19,499. Make it remarkably composed at speed. It doesn't fight the rider. It doesn't shake its head. It doesn't feel nervous. That's exactly what makes it dangerous. The motorcycle hides speed so well that riders often arrive at corners carrying far more velocity than they ever intended. There is another drawback: size and weight. The Hayabusa weighs around 580 pounds fully fueled. Its broad fairing also makes slow-speed maneuvers and tight parking areas noticeably more awkward, especially for shorter riders. Compare it with a Kawasaki ZX-10R. The Kawasaki often feels faster because it's lighter, sharper, and far more dramatic. The Hayabusa feels calm, even while traveling considerably faster, and that calmness is exactly the trap. Here's my honest opinion. This is one motorcycle I'd recommend to an experienced, mature rider without hesitation. But it's also the motorcycle I'd work hardest to keep away from someone in their very first year of riding. Everything we've covered so far is history we can learn from. The final motorcycle on this list is something you can still order from a dealership today, and somehow, it makes the Hayabusa seem almost sensible. Number 1. Kawasaki Ninja H2. Walk into a Kawasaki dealership with a valid motorcycle license and $32,700. No racing credentials, no exclusive club membership, no special approval. You can ride home on a supercharged 998cc inline 4, producing around 240 horsepower at 11,500 revolutions per minute. There has never been another factory-built, street-legal motorcycle quite like it, and that's exactly why it tops this list. A supercharger behaves very differently from a turbocharger. There's no waiting, no boost building gradually, no delay. Twist the throttle at almost any RPM, and the acceleration arrives instantly, along with the unmistakable mechanical whine that owners describe as completely addictive. On a closed course, in third gear. The Ninja H2 compresses distance in a way that fundamentally changes your understanding of speed. To Kawasaki's credit, the company equipped it with an extraordinary collection of electronic rider aids, a 6-axis inertial measurement unit, lean-sensitive traction control, lean-sensitive ABS, cornering management, launch control, a bidirectional quick shifter, and Brembo brake calipers gripping 330mm front discs. The technology is genuinely remarkable, and that's also where the danger begins. The electronic safety systems work so well. That many riders become confident far beyond the limits of their actual ability. Electronics can reduce wheel spin, they can intervene when traction disappears, but they cannot rescue a rider who enters a tightening corner at 150 miles an hour on the wrong line. With no escape plan, for riders seeking even more performance, Kawasaki also builds the track. Only Ninja H2R. It starts at around $59,100, produces a claimed 322 horsepower, and quite rightly, cannot be registered for public roads. Now for the ownership reality. This is a specialist motorcycle. It requires specialist servicing. Maintenance costs are substantial. The engine generates an enormous amount of heat, and crawling through city traffic is about as enjoyable as it sounds. Here's my verdict. The Ninja H2 is an engineering masterpiece, but as an everyday road motorcycle, it's completely unnecessary. A Ninja ZX-6R costing around $11,000 will almost certainly make you a faster, safer, and more skilled rider on real roads. The H2 is something different. It's a technological showcase, a collector's trophy, a motorcycle that just happens to wear license plates. 6 machines, 3 different kinds of danger, bad chassis, engineering, documented brake defects, and power that outruns the rider holding the bars. If I had to name the single most dangerous of them, it's the Harley Touring recall bikes, because the flaw is invisible and thousands are still trading hands unchecked. Which of these 6 would you actually park in your garage? Tell me below and subscribe if you want the recall lookup guide next.